Go again. Boom. Okay, everyone can see? Can you see? Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. Let nature guide you into the new year. That is a photo that I took at Rockefeller State Park Preserve in Westchester, New York. And now, as we were talking about, and we heard some wonderful sharing about getting ready for the new year, calling loved ones, reaching out. Some people take time for even visiting the graves of loved ones who passed away, or just remembering them. And it may be reading the Psalm 27, maybe blowing the shofar. But here is a wonderful video of a friend of mine and colleague, Rabbi Sarah Leah Grafstein, who is blowing the shofar right at the Grand Canyon. So here she goes. And let us listen, imagining that we really are right there at the Grand Canyon. So I hope you could hear that as I did share this sound. So here we are in this month of Elul. This is the Hebrew month that precedes Rosh Hashanah. It is a time of preparation. But according to the Jewish mystics, it's not just a time of physical and practical or even spiritual preparations, but that there is this palpable difference in the way that they believed we could encounter the divine in this time right before the Jewish New Year. And even if you're not Jewish, you might just go along for the ride and think about it. Think about, for those in the Northern Hemisphere now on the cusp of autumn, what could it be that makes us feel kind of ready for newness at a time that things seem to be changing and summer is waning? And we have here this concept, this classical concept that called the king is in the field, or you could say the sovereign is in the field, the queen is in the field. This notion that God is about to be on that throne, Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our sovereign, on Rosh Hashanah. But right now, God's on the way to the palace. God is, so to speak, out in the field, greeting all of us on the way to the palace. So if someone would like to read where it says the king is in the field, and unmute yourself, since I can't see too well while I'm showing the PowerPoint. If someone just wants to unmute themselves and read that section on the king is in the field, which is from Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, who was the founder of the Chabad Hasidic movement. I won't call on anyone. I'll just let somebody jump in if you'd like to read. Okay. You have to unmute if you want to read.
Hi, Julie, it's Marty. If I can read it, I'd love to do that.
Please, Marty, please read. Okay.
Before a king enters a city, its inhabitants go out to greet him and receive him in the field. At that time, anyone who so desires may go out and greet him. He receives them all pleasantly and shows a smiling countenance to all. As he proceeds to his city, they follow him. Afterwards, when he reaches his royal palace, one may only enter his throne room with permission. And this is granted only to the nation's elite, to a select few. In the month of Elul, we go out to receive the light of his countenance in the field, so to speak, as it is written, God will cause his countenance to shine upon you.
So here, this mystic idea that right before the big days, the days of awe, God is so available to us out in the field. Now, by out in the field, I think they stress that meant, in our everyday activities, in our normal course of life, we don't have to show up in the palace at the synagogue all dressed up, but we can just find God so approachable, so ready to approach us. Still, from the modern ear, there's still a kind of patriarchal tone for that, right? Because it's the king, always the father, the king out in the field. And Jewish mysticism will say it's not only the king, but it is also the feminine divine, the queen. It's not just a masculine image, as I noted there on this slide. In the Zohar, which is like the great big book of Kabbalah, of Jewish mysticism, the Shekhinah. So Shekhinah is the divine feminine, the indwelling divine presence. And she herself is described as a fragrant, verdant field. She is the field. Maybe she is the field where the divine can be found. And so we can go out in nature and meet this divinity that infuses all of life. Gabriel Strauss, a modern Jewish educator, and others have stressed that we can take the king being in the field as literally, we go out to a field. We can go out in nature and have that sense at this time of year that when we're out there in the field, as it's a buzz with life, as it's at its peak and yet past its peak, at least in this part of the world, we really can sense the divinity there. And so I'm going to share a little video that I made in a local, this is a local garden that was planted and recreated as a like a flowering wetland next to a creek that had been neglected and was becoming polluted, and it was beautified and made like a home for pollinators and bees. So this is a slow motion video that I made of some of the butterflies and the flying creatures in the meadow, in the field. I'll just let you feel that you're there and that you hear the buzzing and you smell the flowers and you feel the fresh air. It's just about 1 minute long, but give you a little sense of being out in a beautiful field at this time of year. So when I said the Shekhinah, I'm thinking that a lot of people here have heard that term, but maybe not everyone. If you want to just like either raise your hand, wave your hand, or you can signal, you know that you can make a reaction and just put a thumbs up if you've heard the word Shekhinah, which I'll write in the, I think a lot of people who joined us are familiar, but don't feel bad if you're not familiar because it's a wonderful thing to learn about. Shekhinah is the divine, I'm writing it one way to spell it in the chat, is that sense of the feminine, divine, indwelling presence that infuses all of creation and all being. And in a sense, one way to look at it is kind of like Mother Nature. When I go out to to someplace in nature, I feel that I'm encountering the Shekhinah. But that's not the only way we can talk about a divine name that is about nature, because even the classic name I'm writing right now in the chat, Elohim, a name from the Bible, that's the name of God in the creation story. Our Jewish mystics have noted that this, every Hebrew letter has a numeric value that's called gematria, right? Gematria. For example, anyone know like the gematria of the number 18, why that number is important in Jewish life? You can unmute yourself and tell us if you want to.
Chai.
Chai, right?
Chai.
Because the equivalent chai means living or life, and its numerical value is 18. That's why Jews like to give denominations of 18 when you're giving to charity and so forth. So the word Elohim, which means God, in gematria, numerically, it's equivalent to a word for nature, hateva. Hateva, the nature, is equivalent to Elohim, which is the forces of nature. And that's not just some wild new agey thing I'm thinking of, but actually Hasidic Jews and Jewish mystics have been saying this for centuries, for a long time. And interestingly, in the Talmud, in ancient Jewish lore, they talked about Elohim as being God's name that is more about the judgmental aspects of God, rather than sort of the nice, gracious, merciful aspects of God. And I'm wondering if anyone would have an idea, like, why would the God of nature be seen as judgment, equaling judgment? Anything about nature and judgment? Any thoughts about that? Feel free to jump in if you'd like to share.
The entire Torah is filled with catastrophe, with natural catastrophe,
Right.
starting with the flood
Right.
and with multiple droughts. So they were, in our story at least, facing constant threat from nature.
So people
And they attributed
thank
it to
you.
judgment again and again.
So I think we could attribute it to that and say when disasters happened, it was God judging us. And sometimes that's carried over into modern times, right? Right now we're having a terrible hurricane and named after my grandma, unfortunately. But in modern times, some people really rejected that, but I think that we're having a new way of seeing that. And that is that, these disasters, natural disasters, or the harshness of nature is not something sent by God just to punish us, but that sometimes it's totally beyond our control. It's like just the laws of nature that there's powerful forces that we can control, but also when we're out of harmony with nature, we exacerbate those problems, as we know, that all the fires we're experiencing, the climate change, the things we're experiencing now have to do with something that's gone whack with our relationship to nature. But nonetheless, Elohim can be nature in a beautiful way, and it can be nature kind of in the way that is awesome and sometimes fearsome. Judith, what would you like to share?
I don't know if this is correct or not, but I've always understood judgment, the word din,
Yes.
to seek balance. And I always see nature as trying to seek balance.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. It needn't be, I think, again, the way I've seen it is it's not, the way I see that aspect of God is not as something harsh. It may seem harsh to us, but it's sort of impersonal. The laws of nature are not personal. They weren't designed to make me happy or unhappy. They are what they are, right? There's another aspect we talk about God, like as Adonai, as Yah, as Yud He Vav He. That's that transcendence and that love. But there's certainly an aspect to our experience and to the natural world that's, I don't want to romanticize it, right? The natural world can be awesome and even fearsome. So those are some of the names of God and some of the traditional ways of thinking that at this time of year in particular, we can experience God and some people would say literally going out into the field and in nature. And before we look at some Jewish texts kind of about going out into nature, I'd like anyone to jump in if you, or again, you can write this in the chat if you don't want to speak out loud, but I love it if you speak out loud. Why would this time of year be a time that we might feel God's closeness in nature when it's not springtime, except for those of you in the Southern Hemisphere? Then you jump in and tell us what it means to you. But for people in the Northern Hemisphere, it's not, the beginning of spring. It's not the height of summer. It's just on the edge of fall. And for people, if you are in Northern California, and of course, dealing with the smoke and the dryness, or if you live in Israel, if you've lived in Israel, that's a very dry time of year. Any thoughts about why we'd sense God's presence more? There's no right or wrong answer. I just wonder what people think of that, or if you personally experience some sense of closeness to divinity getting out at this time of year in particular.
Having lived on a farm for more than once, this time of year is final harvest. And so when you sense the abundance that has come from the earth, it really is one way of feeling God's beneficence, magnificence, and generosity.
Well, Terry, thank you for sharing that. And I think that's a good reminder that our Jewish holidays are very tied to this cycle of nature and the agricultural cycle. So when we get to Sukkot in particular, that was the most joyous holiday of the year in biblical times. It's still a very joyous time of the year when you sit in your harvest hut and you reap the harvest and enjoy being out in nature. And this could be seen as a preparatory time for that, getting ready for that harvest time, right? Or if you have a garden at home, you may be getting kind of those last harvests of the tomatoes or the squash or whatever it is. And I really appreciate that response. Anybody else have a thought about how you feel, particularly this time of year, that creates a sense of closeness, or some sense like kind of the divisions are thinning between us and the divine? Has anyone felt that? And kind of, I'd like to encourage you, if was someone going to jump in and answer or say something, respond? Hannah?
No, I was just gonna say that it's a little bit like an embrace before the cold comes in.
Right. I think it's a sense of this beauty that is so passing, right? It is just at its height and just past its height. I mean, depending where you are. I don't want to only look from my vantage point. I really felt this. I've just moved to the Philadelphia area, but when I was living in New York State, I really felt it at this time of year. This sense of things are blooming and they're just starting to be bloomed out. It's just getting a little brown around the edges. Now, I know if you're in California, it is during the summer, which I have lived there, it gets very golden or brown during the summer. But in many places, it's like this beauty of summer is just about to wane. And there's a lot of activity, almost like the pollinators are having this frantic last activity to collect, and the animals are going to start collecting for the winter. And I don't know, there's something about it. It's almost ineffable about getting out there. Carolyn, who was my neighbor formerly, my congregant formerly. Yeah, just came back from hiking. So if you want to share anything, among the waterfalls, rivers, streams, and ponds, beautiful. So I think I just invite you, really what I could do is invite you, if you're able to get out in your locale and see if there's something particular about this time of year that creates that sense of closeness, or just maybe walk around with a little bit of a mantra: the king is in the field, or the queen is in the field, or the Shekhinah is in the field, and see, it's really an invitation. That's what, this whole idea of forest bathing is about: invitations, inviting you to try something and inviting nature to share something with you. Okay, so one other thing I wanted to note is, and again, I know for some people this is kind of like very basic, and for other people it's new. So, but I think it's always good to think of these things again, that the very first person in the Torah is Adam, aka Adam, who in Talmudic tradition was actually, intersex, sort of, that they were both male and female, or androgynous. And I'm sorry if I'm not using the term correctly, but they were both male and female. And Adam was created from Adamah, which is the earth. So Adam is created from the earth and is charged with being a guardian of the earth and caring for this beautiful garden that is the gift of God, that is the world. And then is told, at the end of your life, you'll return to the earth. You are a creature of the earth. So I think that's another early Jewish message, that we are very, very connected to Adamah, to the earth. So now I'd like to turn to sources, the next item on that list of things I said we'd look at. And I don't want to put too many sources, but I brought in 3 classic sources that really speak to me about being out in nature and about this importance of finding spiritual expression and getting close to nature. So again, I'm going to share my screen and we'll look at 3 sources and see if anyone wants to help me read about them. Okay. Okay. So first, from the book of Genesis, when Rivka was on her way to meet her intended Isaac, Yitzchak, these are the patriarchs and matriarchs, she was coming on the wagon train, or she was coming on the camel train, and she was surprised to see Yitzchak out there walking in the field. It says, Vayetze Yitzchak lasuach basadeh lifnot arev. So Isaac went out to, it says, to meditate or converse with nature, literally, like with the field. He's going to talk to the field. And our sages, our Talmudic sages, said that Isaac was out there inventing the afternoon prayer. But others have seen this as he was out there meditating. He went out towards the evening, again, as the day, at this sense of waning as the day began to wane, and he would go out there and have a conversation, siach basadeh, to have this conversation out in the field with nature. And at this time he saw the camels coming, and Isaac, saw him, and their eyes met, and she realized who it was. She said, "Who is that man?" And the servant said, that's the boss, right? That's Isaac. So she got all shy and covered herself with her veil. And some people even read it, she got so excited she fell off her camel. Literally, that's what it says, or she got off of the camel. But this is a story that's purported to take place like 4,000 years ago, and shows one of our earliest ancestors spending this daily time out there meditating and conversing with nature. So when we do something like that, I think it's just important to remember that it's not something that we just invented right now in the 21st century, but that it goes, all the way back to our roots. And then, of course, I guess a quintessential example of communing with God in connection to the earth is that of Moses. When Moses, who had fled Pharaoh's Egypt, and he's become a shepherd, he's watching his flock, and God decides to kind of test him and call to him. He speaks to him out of a natural, humble plant, a lowly thorn bush that is burning and not consumed. And does someone want to read what God says, what the divine says to Moses at that moment? So if somebody would like to just unmute yourself and read this verse here in English, is fine. Anybody care to? Otherwise, I'll just read it.
Exodus 3,
Thank
5.
you. Okay.
The divine is revealed to Moshe at a burning bush in the wilderness. Do not come closer. Remove your sandals from your feet, for the place on which you stand is holy ground.
So, the priests in the ancient temple would serve with their bare feet, and the high priest had bare feet. There's something about going barefoot that would put you in touch with, with a holy space. This place is so holy, you must remove your shoes. But there, the ground itself, it says Admat Kodesh in Hebrew, Admat Kodeshu. This is holy ground. But was it in Israel, in the Holy Land? No, it was out in the wilderness, right? It was apparently right around where Mount Sinai is, and they were going to end up there later. But right out there in the middle of nowhere, that is holy ground when you really can stop and pause and find the divinity there and listen to that voice. And even in the humblest, of creatures or plants, you can see that fire of divinity burning and hear what it's calling to you. Then there could be a sense of awe, whether you or not, you literally take off your shoes, which you might want to do, or you might not. You can feel this sense of Admat Kodesh. So actually, before we go to the next slide, I'd like anyone who'd like, if you have a place that you felt like it's Admat Kodesh, a holy land, whether it was Israel or somewhere else, I really invite you to write that in the chat. Can you all see the chat when the slides are on? Let's see, I can't see that one. Can you? So if you'd like to write in the chat a place that you felt is really holy ground to you, I'll write a place myself. Mm-hmm. I wrote some of my places that I felt like were my Admat Kodesh, my holy, especially holy places. And we have some, whether it was in Jerusalem or at a deserted beach or the Texas Hill Country. Feel free to write down what has been a place of Admat Kodesh or is a place of Admat Kodesh to you. And I'm going to write in the chat what I said now in Hebrew, because I see the transcription, of course, doesn't really capture the Hebrew words. Admat Kodesh is like holy land or holy ground, right? It's that sense of place. A lot of people now are speaking about when we're trying to sort of save the planet, we can't just save the planet in the abstract. I mean, we suppose we can try, but if we don't have places that we feel are holy, that they're worth protecting, that they're really sacred to us, and that we start protecting them individually, then it's hard to say we're going to go out and save the whole planet, right? Wow. Rocky shore of the Pacific, what a beautiful spot to be. Wow, that's a great place to pray during Elul. Botanical gardens in Puerto Rico. Wow, along the lagoon. Kiss the ground. Rabbi Terry kissed the ground in Israel. Yeah, I did that, but being a very fastidious young woman, I just kind of kissed it like a mezuzah. You know, the tarmac wasn't so kissable, but right. Good for you for doing that. Yeah. Yes, so people are bringing up some beautiful places. It may be beautiful, and sometimes it's not the most spectacular scenery. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it's just this place that is so precious, and it's someplace that is a holy place to you. So you can keep doing that. I want to show you just one more source, and then we'll go into a little bit of the practices. So this is another, by the way, anyone that says anything that says, you know, it says in the corner that this is a picture I took. This is one of my favorite pictures that I took of a doe, like out wading among the lilies, right? Grazing among the lilies, out among the water lilies. That's at Rockefeller State Park in New York. So this is a pretty well-known selection from a prayer of Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav, again, a Hasidic rabbi. And if you're not familiar, the Hasidic movement was like a movement towards greater piety and Jewish spirituality that's about 300 years old. And today it's seen as very orthodox, but in its day, it was pretty countercultural. So Rabbi Nachman suggested a practice with a long Hebrew name, hitbodedut, which means kind of like going in solituding, being by yourself and praying to God out in nature. Maybe Carolyn, can you see that? Could you read that for us, Carolyn Hoffman?
Sure. Let me just, I am unmuted. Okay.
Yeah.
A Hasidic prayer. Grant me the ability to be alone. May it be my custom to go outdoors each day among the trees and grass, among all growing things, and there may I be alone and enter into prayer to talk with the one to whom I belong. May I express there everything in my heart, and may all the foliage of the field, all grasses, trees, and plants awake at my coming to send the powers of their life into the words of my prayer, so that my prayer and speech are made whole through the life and spirit of all growing things, which are made as one by their transcendent source. May I then pour out the words of my heart before your presence. Oh, that's beautiful.
Yes, what do you think? Well, I know that you really connect deeply when you're out in nature. Since Carol and I have spent time together hiking in nature when I was living in New York. But what are some thoughts about this? The idea that the power of the life of all these creatures and plants and grasses can enliven my prayers, and there's sort of an exchange between me and nature that brings a oneness from all this diversity, and only then can we truly, truly pray. So I'm going to pause here and ask, if people have had an experience like that, if you felt that when you're in nature, in some natural setting that, and we've already heard from some people in the chat have already written about this, that you find some of your best moments of prayer or meditation are in nature, and to what do you attribute that? And feel free to unmute and say something about that, or to write about that if you'd like. Yes, Martina, yes.
So at least for me, so I have so many days that are filled with calendar items from beginning of the day to the end. When I go out in nature, it's like unplugging from all that craziness for a couple of hours. So it gets you kind of just yourself and your thoughts, your prayers, what have you, right? So which is harder to do when you're in the midst of work.
Right.
So
that's something I always felt. Right now I'm between jobs, but whenever I was working, I could get very wound up and then just be out in nature for a few minutes and just feel the switch go off, you know, and really have a different frame of mind. And just sort of that reminder that there's a lot more to the world than things that, the human things, the things that we get so preoccupied with, right? Anyone else care to share an experience about that?
Oh, it just feels more whole being in nature. I'm more connected to the divine because it's all, there's more of a feeling of a whole, and so it's more prayerful.
And I wonder, there are places that Jews go to experience prayer out in nature, like Wilderness Torah, Urban on Demand, others. I'll share some links later. But it kind of surprises me right now, while people are trying to avoid being in indoor groups, you know, because of COVID. A lot of synagogues are struggling, and they're doing so many prayers on Zoom. And some are doing outdoors. Of course, it depends where you are and if you can be outdoors. But I wonder why there's not more. Why isn't more of us going outdoors? It seems very important. At any rate, I think this is going to bring us into some practices that have to do with being out in nature and what they're called. And then that will give us a chance to share with one another, maybe in small groups, about some of our own practices. All right, so I'll share again. So we might want to, in nature, just meditate and practice silence. I brought a saying from Deepak Chopra, but I picked this just because he mentioned the word field, and we're talking about finding God in the field. So he says about midway through there, through meditation, you will learn to experience the field of pure silence and pure awareness. In that field of pure silence is the field of infinite correlation, the field of infinite organizing power, the ultimate ground of creation, where everything is inseparably connected with everything else. And that could be experienced in deep meditation, but I think it's especially enhanced by meditating in nature. And that might be not just pure silence, but that rich silence of nature. I know from growing up in the Texas Hill Country that there was a great silence out in the country, but not an empty silence. It's kind of like, you know, in Jewish tradition, when we talk about, oh, we're going to have the silent prayer now, we're going to have the silent Amidah. But really, in a synagogue with a silent Amidah, it's not really quite silent. It's like, it's a little whisper, because you're supposed to quietly say your prayer so just your ears hear it, right, when you do the silent prayer. So it was in nature that there's always a buzz, there's always the wind, there's always some sounds of nature too. And that's a rich kind of silence. And that can lead us into meditative states. And a very important thing that I advocate for finding spiritual experiences in nature and letting nature guide you into your new year is what you could call it a soul stroll, or it is also called Shinrin Yoku in Japanese, or forest bathing. It sounds like an ancient Japanese tradition, but it's actually started just a few decades ago by a psychologist in Japan, and it's become popular around the world, either by the name Shinrin Yoku, you can hashtag it and look for it, or by the name forest bathing, and people do trainings, formal training to become a forest bathing guide and really help people experience, people who are not used to just getting out there, how they can slow down and really commune with nature in a way that heals the body and heals the soul. And I believe this is also an American tradition for those of us who are here from the United States, whether we look at the writings of, the philosopher and social activist Henry David Thoreau, the great conservationist John Muir, the popular nature poet who recently passed away, Mary Oliver. It seems like a really great American tradition to go out and saunter, to go out and spend hours hiking in nature, taking notes, writing poetry, getting inspired, right? There's a little picture that I took of some people sauntering together. But as we say that, I'd like to say that it's important to note that sauntering in nature doesn't only mean for people who are able to walk, and hike, but sauntering can be any means that gets you around. And there are some great groups out there now for people to support people with disabilities getting out and experiencing nature, including just for starters, this website, Disabled Hikers, so that the sauntering and please take it, as a general word for any way that you ambulate. And so this is again from Henry David Thoreau, some of his thoughts on sauntering. And I would love it if someone would like to read this about where he thought the word sauntering came from. He really wasn't a linguist, so this really might have not been the etymology of the word, but it's a wonderful kind of a midrash, a midrash, a creative explanation of the word sauntering. And if somebody may hasn't read something would like to read this, I would love it. Anyone care to? Otherwise, I'll read it. I'll read from the words of Thoreau, 1862. I met with but one or two persons in the course of my life who understood the art of walking, that is, of taking walks, who had a genius, so to speak, for sauntering, which word is beautifully derived from idle people who roved about the country in the Middle Ages and asked charity under pretense of going à la Sainte Terre to the Holy Land. Don't know if I said that right. Till the children exclaimed, there goes a Saint Terre, a saunterer, a holy lander. They who never go to the Holy Land in their walks as they pretend are indeed mere idlers and vagabonds, but they who do go there are saunterers in the good sense, such as I mean. Some, however, would derive the word from sans terre, without land or a home, which therefore in the good sense will mean having no particular home, but equally at home everywhere. For this is the secret of successful sauntering. One who sits still in a house all the time may be the greatest vagrant of all, but the saunterer in the good sense is no more vagrant than the meandering river, which is all the while sedulously seeking the shortest course to the sea. It is wandering, and we are wandering too. So I think he's got a couple of wonderful points there that if you see the land as holy, right? If you see it like Admat Kodesh, then your hiking is transformed into this pilgrimage, into a sacred pilgrimage. And it's really a mental shift. And then it can also be that sense of without a land or a home, that is like Abraham, our father, and Sarah, our mother, who were the Ivrim, the people who came from somewhere else, who were wandering in the world. This is our heritage too. So if you think of this sauntering as a spiritual practice, soul strolling, whatever, and however you get around, I think it's a beautiful way. It's another beautiful way to think about spiritual practice. So we've got, the meditating, the praying, and just the walking around with intention in nature that can give us a sense of sacred practice out in nature. So now I want to look at your own spiritual practice in nature. As we're about, up to the hour, about at least midway through our program tonight, hope we could share about some of our own things that we do. And if connecting with nature is an important part of your spiritual practice. And some of my suggestions, if you came to hear some things from me, but I want to hear from you too, are to go in with an intention, with what's called in Hebrew kavanah. You might go out to nature with a question that's on your mind. and just kind of be open to the messages that you might receive from the Shekhinah, from the divine presence that fills nature. Perhaps there will be a message that comes your way. You might go out with a blessing to nature. You may make a query that you bring. And I suggest slowing way down. Of course, it's good to go on that nice aerobic hike, but if you really want to get into that spiritual frame of mind, slowing down can be helpful. To observe with each of your senses, you might in the same spot, look, close your eyes and listen, to smell, to see what you taste on the wind, what you feel in your body, what you feel, what you touch, if you're so blessed to have all those senses available to you. And also, as you walk and saunter, you might focus for a while on one of the senses or the other, or on what's going on in your own body, kind of a meditative walk. If you can walk regularly, if you can return to the same place week after week, day after day, if you're really lucky, or season after season, you really see the changes, and that can be very spiritual. And you may have a practice that you do. For me, it is the nature photography. For some people, it could be painting. For others, it could be meditating. And then one more last Jewish tradition, of course, for focusing our attention in nature is saying blessings or brachot. So this is one of my favorite pictures. I have to say that I've taken of one of my favorite birds, the great blue heron. But there are so many wonderful brachot that many of you probably know or may know for all kinds of wonders of nature. But a couple of them are for seeing the great big wonders of nature. We say, Baruch atah, all the blessings, Baruch atah Adonai and Eloheinu melech haolam, osei maaseh bereshit. God makes the work of creation. When you see something majestic like the Grand Canyon, the hills, the deserts, lightning, the sea, although the sea gets its own special blessing too. And then when you see the little beautiful things that you have to pause, that catch your eye, beautiful trees and animals, or even beautiful people, you can say at the end of the blessing, Shekacha lo ba'olamo, that there's stuff like this in God's world. And I will actually put this website, in the, I'll gather some of these websites during a breakout, and then you can, I can share them with you if you'd like to look at it further. But whenever I would go to some of my favorite places that I like to saunter in nature, I like to go and to enter. And when I really feel the sense of the place, to say that blessing, and I like to say it often in the feminine, Brucha at, Shekhinah, or Brucha at Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, I praise you, God, Shekacha la ba'olama, in the feminine, it's this way in her world, the Shekhinah's world. And I will often sometimes go out there with a question or just an openness or a prayer. But I'd like to take some time now to ask, first of all, to ask you if you have a special practice that you do in nature. And then to give us a time to share if we did go out in nature, and how many people, if you want to signal, if you raise your hand or just, signal with a reaction, if you picked up something in nature, out on a walk recently. That was sort of the homework assignment. If you got this signed up in time, and if you brought something, if you brought something, you can show us, right? Okay. So some people have it, and if you didn't get it recently, maybe you have something on your desk or something in your room that you want to share. Okay.
Okay.
So I'll tell you,
I
wait, but Carolyn, just pause for just a moment. I'd like to, maybe I'll just take a poll. I wonder if I can take a poll. Since we have about 13 people present right now, including me. Would you be more comfortable to go meet one-on-one with somebody and share, like in a breakout, to share what it is that you found, so you could talk about it more and talk about some of your practices for a few minutes? Okay. I'm gonna put people in groups of 3, actually, because that way sometimes one person doesn't really participate, and I don't I hope you will participate. If you don't want to participate at all, when I do the breakout rooms, you can just kind of stick around here with me. So your assignment in this breakout room for like 3, I guess, let's say about 3 minutes, because you'll get about a minute each, is to share if you collected something in nature recently, whether it was a leaf, a rock, a feather, a shell, or if you didn't get to do that, don't worry, it could be a story that you share, or just that you want to share one of your practices that you do in nature, and giving each person like about a minute to do that. We'll do that in breakout groups, then we'll come back, and if there's something you want to share with the whole group, you could do it then, okay? So let me assign automatically, and we're going to do, let's see, 4 rooms, okay? And here we go. So there'll be 2 or 3 participants in each room. Okay. All right. Let's see. All right, here we go. Okay. So Corinne, you're with me in the room, and you're welcome to talk to me, or you can go into your breakout room in room 3 if you'd like. I'm going to pause the recording during these breakout rooms. Welcome back. I'm just slipping into the chat some links if anyone's interested on some of the things that have been mentioned so far, including the sources we learned are on a source sheet, some things about forest bathing, Shinrin Yoku, about what's called the wild church movement, and the churches that are starting to meet in the outdoors, and Jewish retreat centers, which I put on my own website, and blessings, and whatever might interest you, just bookmark or cut and paste those for yourself if you'd like. Before we move on to like things that I saw out in nature, I'd like to hear from you if there was something that you shared, a practice that's really worked for you, or if there was some object you found that had a lot of meaning for you that you want to share with the whole group. That would be lovely.
I shared that I've been collecting beautiful pieces of quartz to bring back to my father and grandfather's gravesite, so that I know the tradition is you find a stone there, but because I travel from Arizona to Chicago, I feel like I want to bring a part of my home to my father and grandfather.
That's beautiful. And I think you can make that very creative. I know with my teacher, Rabbi Zalman Schechter Shalomi, if you go to his grave in Boulder, Colorado, people put all kinds of things there, and they put all kinds of rocks that they specially collected. So I think that could be really meaningful, actually. Anybody else have anything you want to either share of either a practice that you do or something that a found thing that you wanted to share? Okay. Well, if you think of it, you're welcome to write in the chat. I'm going to.
Rabbi Julie?
Yes.
I have something I want to share. It's also a question.
Yes.
So when I go for my walk,
yes,
I don't do it every time,
right.
But the first time I ever did it, I was on one of the Greek islands, and it was my last day there, and I went to the meadow, and I heard a voice say, just pick one of each flower. And I did. I picked one of each flower, and I held it in my hand, and I burst out crying because I felt like I was holding God in my hand. So, and that was many, many, many years ago. And this summer, when I've been going on my walk, as I'm leaving,
Mhm.
I pick like one Queen Anne's lace. I pick some weeds. I come home and I put it in a vase next to where I'm working.
Mhm.
And I feel so like I'm still in nature, but then when I think of Shemitah,
Yes.
like, should I be doing that? Because should I be leaving
Yeah.
it where it is and saying thank you, So it's become a big conflict for me.
Well, for those who might not be familiar with the term Shemitah, which again, I'll put in the chat. Shemitah is also the sabbatical year, which is actually starting now. This Rosh Hashanah, it's going to start in like a week. It's this year, the year of rest. And I'd love to do some class. We're not going to talk too much about that tonight, but that's a really huge subject that people are becoming very engaged with, that this is a time to let the land lie fallow and not to cultivate it in ancient times, and also to forgive debts and so on, to have a kind of a healing of nature and a recalibration of society. So, really people all became foragers in this classic sense, or they could become foragers, or they ate stored food and so on. So it's not that you can't go pick things, it's that you don't go out and plant things and cultivate them. So I think as far as Shemitah, you're fine. But it would be if you start out gardening there, that wouldn't be traditional. Now, traditionally, Shemitah was for the Holy Land. But again, if you find every land is Holy Land, then we need to find practices to do anywhere. I don't know, your act is so laden with beauty and symbolism. And I know that arranging flowers is a sacred art in many traditions, and there's a lot of symbolism. And, in Judaism, again, the divine is compared sometimes to a rose or to a lily. So I think you could explore that. That's a beautiful experience.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead now because I do want to respect the time. I could go on all night, like a Seder, but I did want to share a few things that I think I've gained as I've done some of my own exploration out in nature. And let's see. Okay. So when I'm talking about things that I learn in nature, I want to stress that even though I can find these symbolic lessons that I gain in nature, and the sages said, oh, you can learn modesty from a cat, and you can learn all these lessons from the animals. Still, the lessons those are lessons about being a human. There are lessons about our lives, but of course there's bigger lessons we learn in nature. There's lessons about how the world is so much bigger than us, and how there's a not more than human world so much larger than us. And we can also consider that the lessons of the great Jewish philosopher of the 20th century, Martin Buber, who talked about I, thou, that if we look at nature in an exploitative way, it becomes I, it becomes an object for our use. But if we look at each creature, even a tree, an animal, as I, thou, then the thou becomes the portal to the divine. So whatever we might learn, or whatever I might learn in nature, it's much more than these things I'm going to present to you. But I'm going to show you some photos I took. These are photos I took, and some of the things that I think about as I'm walking in nature, doing my own little soul stroll, and what it makes me think of. So one thing is, whenever I see a web like this spider web, of course, I don't want to romanticize it. If you're the fly, it means doom. You're about to be eaten. If you're a spider, it means you're going to survive and eat lunch. But to me as a human, to see that beautiful interconnected web is always a reminder of the interconnected fabric of all life, that if I touch this web in one place, it will affect all the rest of it. And that everything is connected. And I think when we say the Shema and say, Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, we're saying that in all of this endless diversity, there is an underlying unity, and everything is connected. Now, so in that sense, I can find nature as kind of a mirror to my soul. If I climb a mountain, it can be about my peak experience. If I wander, if I'm in the desert, I can think of the times I wander. If it's flowing water, I think about going in the flow. I love this idea that nature is like, you know, is also a reflection of us and not a reflection of us. And I explore that a lot on my website, Wellsprings of Wisdom. Another thing that I see, especially this time of the year, is can be characterized by a Japanese word, wabi-sabi. I hope I'm saying words right, but it's a Japanese term for finding the beauty in the ephemeral. And as you can see in this little picture, this butterfly is on a leaf that's been chewed up, and the butterfly has a short lifespan, but just this fleeting beauty, this moment that the butterfly alights, it's so beautiful, and it can be a blessing moment. And by the way, if we don't know, if you do know all the Hebrew blessings and you want to learn them, that's a beautiful practice. And if it's like, it's not like other things you can do is just to say like Baruch Atah or Brucha Ad, you are blessed, bless the source of life, or just like holy wow. But just those ephemeral little moments, that wabi-sabi, seeing that in the things that pass, that they are, and that are imperfect, they are beautiful. And we think about that, especially Sukkot coming up. Another thing, this is a photo I took this summer of this goldfinch on a thistle, right? You know, in the Bible and the Torah, thorns and thistles are sort of a curse, but here it's dinner or food for this goldfinch and its beauty, to remind me that life, even when it seems harsh, it's beautiful. And even when it seems beautiful, it can be a struggle. And it can all be like held together. So that's something that I find in nature. This is the great egret. As it walks, it makes ripples. And again, just like the web that connects everything, the ripples remind me that when if I wade in the water, I throw a stone in the water, it creates ripples that go out and out and out. So every little deed that we do can touch much further. We might throw in that stone at the edge of the lake and it can touch the other shore in some way, you know. So our deeds that we do can reverberate like the ripples in the that they can reverberate like the ripples in the water. And as we look at this picture of the great egret, when I first posted one of the pictures of the great egret, I shared a poem from Navajo tradition. I'd love to read it out loud to you, and I'd like to invite you, if you'd like to just contemplate the great egret as I read this, or even close your eyes if that's comfortable to you, or soft focus your eyes and imagine yourself in one of your holy places, your Admat Kodesh, surrounded by beauty, which in Kabbalah is called Tiferet, this beauty, the beauty of the world, and how that can be a very holy experience. So this is a poem, a prayer. It's really a prayer. I learned about this as a child growing up in the Southwest, but I will afterwards share a link where you can hear this spoken in the original Navajo language. But for now, hear it in English. So if you can either look at the picture I posted, or you might just want to imagine yourself in a place of beauty. In beauty I walk, with beauty before me I walk, with beauty behind me I walk, with beauty above me I walk, with beauty around me I walk. It has become beauty again. Today I will walk out. Today everything negative will leave me. I will be as I was before. I will have a cool breeze over my body. I will have a light body. I will be happy forever. Nothing will hinder me. I walk with beauty before me. I walk with beauty behind me. I walk with beauty below me. I walk with beauty above me. I walk with beauty around me. My words will be beautiful. In beauty all day long may I walk. Through the returning seasons may I go. On the trail marked with pollen may I go. With dew about my feet may I walk. With beauty before me may I walk. With beauty behind me, may I walk. With beauty below me, may I walk. And with beauty above me, may I walk. With beauty all around me, may I walk. In old age, wandering on a trail of beauty, lively may I walk. In old age, wandering on a trail of beauty, living again, may I walk. My words will be beautiful. That's a very special poem to me, although not from Jewish tradition, but I find it resonates for me in this kind of universal meaning because it's also I read about that the word for beauty in the Diné language of the Navajos is hojho, which is translated something like balance and beauty and harmony. And it sounded so much like this Kabbalistic concept of tiferet, that this quality of the heart that balances everything. So I just will take a moment to share with you a link if you would care to look into this poem more and to hear somebody say it in that native language. I'm going to share that right now. Okay. There you go. Okay.
Will it have the translation? Will it have what you
the
just
whole
read?
poem that I read?
It's so beautiful.
It should. I think it will. I'm going to,
Okay.
I will check. If somebody wants to follow that link, let me know if it was there. Otherwise, I'll share it with you in the chat. Okay. And then let's see. I'm going to, there's one other, a couple of other ones here. This just happened while I was on vacation. I got to finally see family that live out in Minneapolis, and we went to Lake Superior, which is really a place of otherworldly beauty and grandeur. And on the shore there, very close to the shore of the world's largest lake by area, was this tiny little frog called the mink frog. And just having a wonderful time paddling around in the edge of this unfathomable lake. And it really spoke to me about my own life and how I'm paddling around in the shallows and how I'm, absorbed in my own little world, which is a beautiful world, but there's so much more often than we see if we can, or I could say for myself, than I can see in this human world, in the physical world and natural world, much less the spiritual cosmos. There's so much more than I let in. So that's what that little frog at least was teaching me from my point of view. And about once a year, I get like the perfect grasshopper photo. The full photo shows the whole antennae, but whenever I see this, I think of this classic poem by Mary Oliver. So I'm going to read it to you. If you're a Mary Oliver lover, she's kind of was the patron saint, I guess, of nature lovers as a poet. But this is a poem that's actually included in the Reconstructionist Jewish Days of Awe prayer book. The Summer Day by Mary Oliver. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean. The one who's flung herself out of the grass, the one who's eating sugar out of my hand, who's moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who's gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I've been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? I mean, that is a great prayer for Rosh Hashanah, right? And Yom Kippur. What is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Slow down and pay attention. Yeah. So we could definitely, I could draw on all these different poems as well as traditional Jewish prayers. a couple more things. We'll be getting to a closure, and I want to leave time for people to just schmooze and visit at the end. But certainly being out, this is the same place at different seasons. You know, being out and seeing the changing seasons to me speaks so much of the nature of cycles, the cycles of life, the cycle I'm in right now, and consider what we learn from the seasons. What do you learn from when you're out in the seasons? And I also, I wanted to share this picture of a little leaf. I decided to do a tashlich, a nature tashlich, because many people are pointing out that, you know, if we throw prodigious amounts of breadcrumbs into the water and feeding wildlife, we're often told to not feed the waterfowl, like that's not really good for them. I mean, I think in the old days, people emptied out their pockets of a few crumbs, and sometimes now people just pour tons of bread. That's not really the idea of tashlich, right? But, you know, I think tashlich is so beloved because it's, honestly, I think it's a chance that people get outside in nature. I think it was kind of a little bit of paganism reasserting itself, if I could say that. You're in shul for hours all morning, get out there in the afternoon and go out in nature by some water and sure, cast your sins. You know, the early rabbis were a little bit, they weren't too supportive of that, but the people wanted to do it, right? So you might want to, as a practice, go out in nature now or during the days of awe between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and do kind of your own tashlich, maybe cast something more eco-friendly like this little leaf I found. And to remember, as Rabbi Arthur Waska tells us that, you know, we can't really cast things away in nature. Everything comes back. But what is it that we're willing to let go of and let go with the flow, right? Okay. So I guess we're wrapping up. I wanted to acknowledge that even as we're enjoying the beauty of nature and appreciating it, we're struggling. I mean, there's people are beginning to name climate grief. People call it climate grief because of all of the bad news that we hear about the climate and the terrible reports about climate change. But I think it's more than climate grief, right? It's all the species, the natural world, the seasons that are changing, and things that cannot be repaired or cannot be repaired until lifetimes. The earth is our Garden of Eden. It's our Gan Eden in this vastness of the cosmos. And we can get scared into making changes, you know, it takes big global changes that need to be made. And I'm not sure if fear alone is enough. Maybe it's good that people are scared about the environment, but I truly believe that the more powerful and abiding motivation to heal our relationship to the earth is from love. And in fact, we talk about this on the days of awe. Do you work from yirah, which is like fear, or it could be awe, but like yirah, kind of being scared, or from ahava, from love? I think we need to implant a lot of love in people for this holy sanctuary that is our planet. And, you know, there are groups in many locales that take kids out in nature, that take people from all walks of life out in nature. I hope that would, I don't know if save us, but help us to really care about our local holy Admat Kodesh and to care about the bigger picture. And yes, we've already mentioned, Judith mentioned the Shemitah, the sabbatical year we're embarking on. That can be another focus that helps us to turn our joy in nature, you know, into activism. So we are in this time of the days of awe, and those are called the Yamim Dochaim, the days of awe. Psychologists are telling us more and more that feeling this sense of awe in our lives can have numerous positive effects on our feelings and make us more compassionate. And this is a moment that I felt awe as those geese took off while I was taking a picture of the lake and the reflections in the lake. So I want to ask, this is kind of the second to last slide here, but what can you know, when you think of all the things we've talked about nature, what could these days of awe mean to you? And how could a connection to nature bring more meaning to the Yamim Noraim, the days of awe? Anybody want to share anything about that?
Oh, I guess for me, the days of awe would connote extraordinary, but as I really think about it, everything is ordinary is extraordinary. So I think the days of awe to me are just everything that surrounds us are spectacular and beautiful and bring us radical amazement. So we just need to stop and pay attention to it all.
Well, yeah, I think, thank you. Wait, I'm trying to, sometimes I don't know what button I'm pushing. Now I can see you again. Okay, or I can see your name. That, yeah, that's what some of the psychologists are talking about, at least what I'm just saying in a general way. I'm reading about this, you know, that awe isn't only those big moments of the Grand Canyon. Awe can be those little moments, like when you see those little things that you found on your walk, or you see a bird that you haven't seen.
Your goldfinch on the thistle, when you posted that. Yeah.
Right. Do you know, now I'll tell you where the goldfinch was. This was actually in a little patch of wildflowers on the edge of a parking lot.
Wow.
That was near a bike shop in Minnesota. And we were eating lunch and my daughter said, Mom, my grown daughter says, oh, Mom, there was these beautiful flowers and there was this little bitty yellow bird. And I'm like, I'm out of here. I'm going there. I'm taking a picture. And, you know, again, that was something I could have overlooked, and I'm a nature photographer, so anybody could just overlook it. These moments of awe are everywhere. They're around us.
Right.
And they're not only waiting to be in this, they're in the synagogue, I hope, but they're also out in nature.
I think the thing for all of us though is we need to stop, Julie. And we need to just be still and stand and look at what's around us, or we're not going to see them. We're going to miss it.
Well, that you know, even when I was walking around in the park, even for those who knew me in Westchester, Rockefeller State Park Preserve, I mean, truly a treasure. This is an amazing place. And I see people just like talking on their phones or they're chatting, which is good, but they're chatting so much they're not looking at their surroundings, right? And I think they got a benefit too. I think just being out in nature can be good for you, no matter how much you're paying attention. But if you really want those moments, then slowing down and paying attention, that's kavanah, right? That is the essence of kavanah, of intent, is that sense of attentiveness, like related to what Mary Oliver said.
When you read that poem before about beauty,
yes.
I checked the link and it is in English.
Oh, good. Okay. I think it comes in different versions too. And I remember once I was walking in this spectacular place in the north of Israel, you know, it's kind of in a ledge, a rocky kind of ledge in the Mediterranean, with the sun was setting, and I thought of that poem, and I began to like say it to myself there. So it was sort of bringing these different cultures together. Okay, so, you know, I hope that this evening that you've gotten something, you either learned something new, you met someone new, you got some resources that might be interesting to you to pursue. And I'd love it if you want to write in the chat like one thing that you're taking from tonight. That would be so appreciated if you'd like to take a minute to do that.
Rabbi, can I share?
Yes, please.
You give so much to us. When I was at the university teaching, there was a woman who spoke Diné fluently, and she would give me a little lesson each night.
Wow.
So the first thing I asked her about is what do you call the earth? And so in Dané, it's Shamanaseh. And I heard that and I thought, Shamanaseh. Wow, that sounds like Shema.
Right.
So
wow.
To me, I'm really enchanted by many of the indigenous languages that perhaps they are our lost brethren. So that's
that's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think, you know, you see, I shared things from Japanese culture. I mean, I think there's some things that just resonate, and, you know, people are worried about appropriation, but an appropriation would be like exploiting the culture, right? Well, just sort of taking away from people, but we can share. I mean, we've always been having intercultural, fruitful sharing that can be beautiful and meaningful. Yeah, slow down and look carefully. Some things are learning. let's see.
Now, speaking of sharing, will you share your PowerPoint with us? Is there a chance you can do that?
That I could share the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to figure out where to put it. We can put it in a, can I put it like in a Google Drive or something? I'll have to see. I'm gonna write, well, first of all, right now I'm putting in the chat, I put a few things. One is ways to stay in touch, because I hope this would be the beginning. Really, I did this program because I'm trying to go in new directions as a rabbi, and just to meet people, and to the best thing, if you enjoyed it or you're interested in learning other things, is to be on my own email list, which I put it there where you can get on there. There's a form you can sign. My website, Wellsprings of Wisdom, has a lot about different Jewish symbols and nature. It has resources. And Instagram, I put like nature photography almost every day, just about every day. And I put a lot of it on Facebook, but not quite as much. My email, and this is a free program. So, but if you wish to support my work, I put a couple of ways to support my work. But really the most supportive thing is if you just stay in touch, get on my email list and tell your friends about it. And I don't, before I want to blow the shofar at the end of the formal session, and then just like hang out if people want to hang out, because just you met someone new or you're old friends. But is there anything anybody else wants to add? You know, something you feel really is on your heart right now that you want to tell people, or something that made an impression on you tonight that you want to reinforce? So just feel free to do that. Okay.
I just want to thank you, Rabbi Julie, for taking us into nature, because just as we go into the days of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and Sukkot, I just feel more grounded, more rooted, and I thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
So believe it or not, here I'm a rabbi who just moved. I felt it was very symbolic because I could not find my shofar. I have a lovely shofar. I have not been able to find it, but some friends here loaned me a loaner shofar. And again, a natural object, you know, that calls us. And it's something else beyond words that can move us very deeply. So even though it's now nighttime here, I'm going to blow the shofar. And if you've got a shofar, you can join me if you have one, you can grab it. But I'll do anybody want to give me the calls? Tekiah, Shavarim, Terua, Tekiah, Gdolah. Otherwise I do my own. Okay, here's a Tekiah. And a Shavarim, broken up. And Terua, the call to action. And finally, the big one, Tekiah Gedolah. Okay. Areshet Sfatenu. May our words be beautiful. And just thank you everyone for joining me. I hope please stay in touch. I will have the videos recorded, and I plan to send it out to everyone who registered for this program, whether in person or not. And I'll see about sharing how I can share that PowerPoint. I'm hoping to also do more with these. I'm sharing these photos a lot online, especially on Instagram, but I do want to set up kind of a store, if you will, or something where people can get printed like inspirational material or things that you could put up. You know, I'm not marketing it right now, just like it's an idea, but things you could give to others, things that you could put that might inspire you. And meanwhile, they're in a digital form. Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording right now, and then anyone